everyone, your Filipina lawyer here at your service. Today, I'm going to talk about a recent Supreme Court case of a 12-year-old child snatched from the cradle of innocence by the bestiality of another person whom she is even fond of. This case is about a lascivious conduct and qualified rape committed by a wild beast who has no place in this civilized society. And at the end of my video, I'm going to answer a question from some of my subscribers. I call this child involved here as Jane, which is actually not her true name, in order to hide her true identity as well as the identities of all other persons involved in this case and the places where this happened, as of course required by law here. Also, I'll refer to the accused as Joe. So, Jane was born of parents who separated when her mother cohabited with the accused Joe and the Joe's legitimate children. Jane even fondly called her stepfather as Papa Joe. One day, when she was about 12 years old, her mother went out to sell rice cakes and left Jane and her half-siblings with Joe in their house. Joe then took Jane inside a room, removed her short pants, and went on top of her to satisfy his lustful desires by having sexual intercourse with poor Jane. The following day, Joe again molested Jane by forcing her to suck and fondle his sexual organ and by having sexual intercourse with her again. Poor Jane. Jane did not tell her mother about her ordeal as Joe had threatened her to be killed. So what happened was, when Jane was already 13 years old, Joe actually molested her anew. She went to his room to ask help regarding her exam, but instead of being a good father to her, Joe suddenly forced Jane to lie on her stomach and lifted her skirt and then undressed himself and inserted his sexual organ to her anus. In yet another incident at the pig pen, Joe called Jane and directed her to sit in his lap and picked her sexual organ. One day, when Jane arrived home late after buying salt, Joe scolded her, punched her, and hit her with a coconut grater. Imagine that, people. Jane jumped out from the window and ran away from home. She came across the barrio captain or the barangay captain who brought her to the police. For his defense, Joe denied Jane's accusations and alleged that prior to the filing of the charges against him, he beat Jane because she stole a wall clock, a battery-operated radio, and a sum of money from their neighbors. Although the neighbor did not file a complaint because she was still a minor, but they advised him to discipline her. And what's worse, Jane's very own mother corroborated with Joe and testified that her daughter hated Joe because he would scold and hit her whenever she steals things. She also clarified that there was no time when Jane was left alone in the house because Joe's mother was always there to watch her grandchildren, including Jane. This was affirmed by the grandmother herself, who also testified. The lower court still convicted Joe. Good for him. It relied more on the positive and credible declaration of Jane, which was confirmed by the medical and psychological reports of the doctors, as against the mere denial of Joe and the testimony of Jane's mother and Joe's mother. Was the lower court correct? The Supreme Court said yes. The elements of the crime have been proven beyond reasonable doubt by the prosecution. With respect to qualified rape, it was admitted that Jane was a 12-year-old minor and Joe was the live-in partner or the common law spouse of her mother, particularly sexual intercourse with a woman under 18 years of age by the step-parent or the common law spouse of the parent of the victim. The actual force, threat, or intimidation that is the element of rape under the revised penal code is no longer required because the moral and physical dominion of the stepfather is sufficient to cow the victim into submission to his beastly desires. The prosecution has even established that Joe had carnal knowledge of Jane, employing force and intimidation by means of abuse of authority as testified by Jane. In resolving rape cases, the primary consideration is almost always given to the credibility of the victim's testimony, like Jane. It may be the sole basis for conviction of the accused, since only evidence that can be given regarding that matter is the testimony of the victim, owing to the nature of the offense, which is, of course, usually committed without any eyewitnesses. The Supreme Court said that the rape victim's testimony is given greater weight because she accuses a close relative. Joe's defense of denial cannot overcome the categorical testimony of Jane. It is intrinsically a weak defense, and must be buttressed with strong evidence of non-culpability to merit credibility. The victim's conduct after the sexual molestation and her inability to report the incident are not enough to discredit her. It is unfair and unreasonable to demand a standard of rational reaction to an irrational experience, especially from a 12-year-old. Besides, Jane's testimony is consistent with the medical and psychological findings of the doctors who examined her. Joe was eventually, at the end of the trial, held guilty beyond reasonable doubt of 3 crimes. First, child abuse. Second, lascivious conduct. And third, qualified rape. Imagine how Joe will rot in jail serving his imprisonment. Nobody wants to experience what Joe is experiencing right now, correct? That's why I'm here, your Filipino lawyer, to help you understand our law, which may provide you some guidance in enjoying your life in the Philippines. I've mentioned 3 different crimes Joe was convicted of: child abuse, lascivious conduct, and qualified rape. To give you a better understanding of these crimes, it's best to depict the elements of these crimes, because this is the basis how the prosecution will prosecute the case. So what are the elements of child abuse? The elements of child abuse under Section 3, Article 3 of Republic Act 7610 are the following. First, the accused commits sexual intercourse or lascivious conduct. Second, with a child exploited in prostitution or sexual abuse. And third, when he or she is below 18 years of age. What are acts of lasciviousness? Acts of lasciviousness under the revised penal code has the following elements. First, that the offender commits any act of lasciviousness or lewdness. Second, that it is done by using force or intimidation, or when the offended party is deprived of reason or otherwise unconscious, or when the offended party is under 12 years of age. And third, that the offended party is another person of either sex. Lascivious conduct is the intentional touching, directly or indirectly, of or the introduction of any object into most intimate parts of the body of a person with intent to humiliate, harass, degrade, arouse, or gratify the sexual desire of another. In this case, Jane was able to recall in a clear, straightforward manner how Joe abused her. What is qualified rape? Under the revised penal code, there is qualified rape when the victim is below 18 years of age and the offender is a parent, ascendant, step-parent, guardian, relative by consanguinity or relative by affinity within the 3rd civil degree, or the common law spouse of the parent of the victim. As in this case, the accused was a common law spouse of Jane's mother. receive a lot of email asking the legal age for consented sex without any legal repercussion. There are many articles online saying it's 12 years old. Some says it's 16 years old. So what is the correct age? Well, the correct age is 18 years old. Sex with a child below 12 years old is statutory rape, even if it is consensual. This doesn't mean that you can have a consensual sex with those who are 12 years old and above without any legal consequences. You may still be prosecuted for child abuse here if the Filipina is below 18 years of age. Also, your minor Filipina might not be interested in suing you, but her parents or guardian might be. Well, under the law of the Philippines, parents or guardians of a minor child has legal capacity to sue on behalf of the minor. The case may or may not prosper, but just imagine the burden you will experience once you get charged of any of these crimes. I know it's quite difficult for you guys to determine the real age of us Filipinas. Just take for instance my case. Most people mistakenly think I'm still in high school. Well, thank you for that compliment. But unfortunately, I'm double the age of a high schooler. So one of the things you should do before dating a Filipina or even before chatting to any Filipina is to ask for her ID. Perhaps a government-issued ID if that would be possible. This will not only help you avoid any legal repercussions, but also will help you avoid heartbreaks. Until next time, folks. If you want to know the answers to the legal questions that you've been seeking for in the Philippines, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss anything from me. And if you learned something from this video and you want to hear more from me, please support my channel.